Um, just studying for my GREs
Oh my
and
goodness.
times.
GREs. I remember those.
Yep.
I had to take my GRE 3 times before getting a good score.
Oh man. Yeah.
That'll probably be me. I'm studying for it right now, but like
Oh,
probably gonna go for three.
oh my.
Yeah. That's what I'm thinking too. It's like I keep worrying about the GREs because I feel like it's going to be an important piece, but I know I'm not going to do very well, for the math and like keep studying the equations and the combinations and permutations and I just can't get it. So
Oh
I know
God.
at one point I'm just going to have to let it go and be like, it's the best I can do, but I don't know what point that's going to be. So,
Wow. I didn't realize you have to take the GREs if you're coming from a master's program.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to, but you might as well. Again, it's a waste
yeah.
of my second time.
Okay.
I think most of them require like it seems like most of the programs that I was looking at, it's been saying like even having a master's is like the baseline for some of them.
Mm.
So it seems like you do have to take the GREs as like a requirement. So
Yeah. Mm. Okay. So we were just I was just talking with Loretta about what kind of program she's looking for. I wonder if either of you have more thoughts about. I'm sure you do, but like, in terms of what kind of program are you applying to, and what kind of program you're looking for in terms of your doctoral studies.
Loretta, do you want to go?
Sure. Um, I think as of right now, I'm looking for more of like a research heavy like clinical program, just because that's kind of what interests me the most right now. I know that like most clinical programs, or almost all of them, will have like a clinical component, which I'm also interested in because I've never had any kind of experience with that. And I know a lot of students do end up enjoying like the clinical component more than they enjoy the research component. So I'm still trying to really figure that out. I've only started looking at schools and like possible mentors, but it's been kind of a process because there are just so many programs and like it's really hard to compare them across the board because they vary so much and like maybe the score or like maybe the school has like mentors that I would really love to work with, but like the GREs are out of the roof or like the GREs are really low and that's kind of a red flag, and then there's like the issue of funding, so it's just been like a really slow process like figuring out what exactly I'm looking for,
Yeah.
um, without having already gone through it, or talked to anyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel the same way too with like, it's getting kind of overwhelming and I'm wondering like what's a good first step to take because I feel like there's so many directions we should consider. It's the funding, it's the mentor, it's the what interests
Hmm.
we should pursue. And I think luckily for me, I've weeded out a good proportion of it. So contrary to you, I'm more interested in the counseling piece of it.
Hmm.
So I realize that I really need I want to be in a scientist practitioner model where I can kind of develop my research skills, but I really want to, develop the practitioner side because I do really, really enjoy the clinical work and I do love doing actual counseling and I can't imagine letting go of either. So at least luckily that helps me weed out some of the clinical psych programs that are more research heavy. So, but then that also limits it as well because then there aren't as many counseling psych programs. So yeah,
Yeah. Jessica, are you seeing clients right now?
I am. So I work at a psychiatric hospital.
Ooh.
So I've been seeing patients, with pretty severe, more pretty acute and stuff. So it's been good seeing a spectrum of just, what kind of mental illness looks like. So I really enjoy that.
Mm.
So,
Mm. That's awesome.
hmm
Yeah, I remember that process of looking at programs, and I came right in with my bachelor's. I worked a year, and as I was working that one year, I was applying to grad school, and that was overwhelming because I didn't even know what grad school would be like. And I really didn't have a lot of idea of where I'm going. So I applied to a little bit of both, clinical, a little bit of counseling.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that the scientist practitioner model is a good one, but I really didn't know what that meant for me. And I came in wanting to be a professor, and now I'm leaving not sure if I want to be a professor. So I think, yeah, and I think I see my cohort members and students in my program who came in with a master's, and I think that they, compared to those of us who came in with our bachelors, seem to know what they wanted, and had more of a focus going through the doctoral program. And also their class loads were lighter because they didn't have to take all the classes we had to take. And they could get through it a little bit faster too. So I was like, oh, maybe I should have done the master's track and then go into a doctoral program. But yeah, I remember it to be pretty overwhelming. There's so many programs and so many good people that I wanted to work with, and it's hard to know like who they are and how. I mean, it's one thing to see what these faculty members look like on paper in terms of their research interests and their how many students they've mentored and how many awards they've received, but I think it's very different to actually see them in person or get a sense of who they are in person. So it's very difficult and different.
Did you do a lot of reaching out to professors like while you were applying, or did you kind of do it like I don't know, like you just kind of did it by the book, or?
Yeah, I definitely bought a couple of those like APA apply to grad school books, and then did my like Excel spreadsheets. And I try to contact professors, like email them, or especially like after submitting applications and getting interviews, I was able to talk with some of the graduate students who were working with the professor that I'm interested in working with. So I feel like that was a good experience for me to get a sense of who they are as people. But I think I have to admit, I'm not really sure if I really got the sense of it, even in the application process. That I think there's still things that came as a real surprise when I actually got into my program.
Such as?
Oh, Sherry's on. Oh, sorry. Hi, Sherry.
Hi.
Yay, I'm glad you can join us.
Wait, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was really late to this thing. I just got back from work, an hour break from work. Now I'm on, so I don't want to miss this.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here.
Hi.
Hi.
We were just talking about getting to know professors and know their personal styles before making a decision about programs. And I was just saying that there are certain things that surprised me even after I got into the program. I think one thing that surprised me because my program, so I'm in the University of Oregon Counseling Psychology program, and one thing that surprised me is that this program is more of a cohort model in that they don't take students just because your fit is really good with a professor. They think about us as like a whole cohort when they accept us. Like, do we work well and balance each other well as a whole cohort? Because they really think about, and I think in our program there's a lot of mentoring that goes on between students and collaboration that goes on between students, and we don't necessarily work very closely with our professor. So it sort of depends. So they accepted us as a cohort, which meant that when I came in, I didn't know who I was working with as an advisor, and they matched us later on. And so I definitely indicated Dr. Stormshack, Beth, who is my advisor. I indicated as one of my top advisors, but I didn't know that she would be my advisor. And I think, depending on who you get matched with in your own personal style and your advisor's style, you may or may not find a fit with that. and I also didn't really know what my advisor style would be, or what my preferences would be, until I got into the program and was like, oh, maybe I would have liked to have a little bit more warm fuzziness than her style is. So those kinds of things kind of surprised me.
Yeah, I feel like for me, oh, sorry, was someone?
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, that's something that I was talking to Ewing about too, is like, you can look at all the things on their CV and kind of what they do and say that their research interests match, but it's kind of, going through the master's program, there are professors who are better at mentoring you and supporting you than others that are more, academic focused and, what can you do? And so, knowing that I prefer that style, which is, more of the warm, not just warm fuzzies, but kind of be able to support and guide, and not actually just lecture and be like, this is what you should do, but really take the time to develop like a relationship with me and be willing to do that. It's kind of, well, how do you weed out the professors that are going to do that? Because I don't want to get stuck in a program either where it's just, their main interest is to produce research and they're not going to do anything else besides that. They will, but they're not. It's not their big concern. So I don't know where to start with that aside from just asking people like, do you know this person? And then like, yeah, so that's about it. Random thoughts.
Were you gonna say something, Loretta?
No, I totally forgot. Oh, I was just gonna ask, did they like inform you that you were gonna go in as a cohort style, or like did they kind of let you know that it was like a later matching of mentee to mentor, or was it like a total surprise? Like,
Yeah, I think I had the sense that it was more of a cohort model, but I didn't really. Again, I was in my bachelor's. I mean, I was fresh out of my bachelor's. I didn't really know what that meant, versus a program that had more of a match based on your match with your advisor, and so I think it's partly like me, just not really knowing what that meant. And I think now seeing like my, so we have at the U of O, we have both a clinical program and a counseling program, as well as like social and cognitive psychology. And I see my friends in the clinical program, and they are matched directly with their advisor. It's their advisor's choice of whether they want to take a student that year or not, and who they want to take. And it's also very different and very interesting in that sometimes when it works really well, they and their advisor they publish a lot together and they get a lot of mentorship and support. And then when it doesn't work well, it's like, well, what do you do? I guess you're a little stuck. Trying to find someone else to mentor you in that department will be a lot harder because they didn't accept you. Other faculty members didn't have a say in accepting you. So I think that would also be really hard as well. In our program, I wouldn't say that it's really easy to jump from one advisor to another, but it's doable. Like, students have done it. Because if you can make a case that your research interest or your clinical work matches another advisor's better, then you could switch advisors. And I think it's a little bit different too in terms of funding. I think that when an advisor can fund your program, or when they have a grant or something like that to fund your position, I think that sometimes it's better funded. Whereas my program, we depend on what we call the graduate teaching fellowships, which are those that the fellowships that we get, like positions on campus that are either teaching or research, that are funded, but they are all funded in some ways at kind of a minimum wage, and sort of our GTF salaries are pretty minimal, whereas like the clinical students gets a lot more funding in addition to their GTF funding. So sometimes it sort of make a difference that way too. Sorry, my office, there's a phone call coming in, but I'm just going to mute myself. Okay. I'm wondering, Sherry, if you want to share with us a little bit about sort of where you are and what you're looking for in terms of a graduate program.
So I'm currently a rising junior at St. John's University. It's at New York. And I'm looking into clinical psychology programs. So my career goal is to get an doctorate degree in clinical psychology and be involved in practice and academia. So now I'm just working on research projects with my professors that involves like child and adolescent psychology because that's where my interest lies. And I like to hear about what you guys think about like graduate schools and its admission process because I have friends that have tried to got into the admission for it, but didn't get it in the end because of the interview process. So I like to hear about that.
Well, I believe two of us are in master's programs, right?
Hmm.
Uh, so we can talk about that. And then I guess for me, I always knew that I wanted to do a master's first. Like a PhD was not one of my options when I started applying because I knew that it was such a big commitment that it's just not something I could have banked on. I took 2 years actually before applying. So I was 2 years out of school before I actually went back to my master's. So I took a lot of time deciding. I worked, um, did the whole post grad thing. And um, I would say that being in a master's first has been like a really good personal decision for me because it really got me to hone what my interests are. Like reading my statement, my personal statement to get into the master's program here at San Diego State, and thinking about what my personal statement's going to look like applying to PhD programs. They're not even going to look like they came from the same person because just everything about my research interests have changed. Like I've gained a lot of experience, and I think it's just really helped me like feel better about my decision to apply to a PhD program because now I actually know that's something I want to do and it's something that I'm comfortable committing to for that many years. Whereas when I first applied to the master's program, I could say with maybe like 50% certainty that I wanted to get to go on to a doctoral program. So personally, like the master's was like a really good decision for me. But for you, it sounds like you're a rising junior and you've already decided that you want a doctoral degree, which is like huge. I think it's like really mature and like a lot of foresight. Not something that I could have done as a junior. So for you, it might be a little bit different. You might want to just like apply, and it sounds like you're into a little bit of research already. Um, it just sounds like you're pretty ahead. I don't really like know what your situation is personally, but just in the last 10 seconds, it seems like you got a little bit figured out.
Yeah, like my problem is like now I'm interacting with a lot of graduate students, and the one that I've known her for, the one that the one girl that I talked to, she finished her master's degree here at St. John's, but she did really well in research and in getting her experience, but didn't get into what she wanted. So I'm just worried that after I obtain my master's degree from St. John's, because I'm now in the BN and MA program at St. John's University. So I'm just worried that after I get the degree and have the experience and everything, they're still too competitive for me to get in. So that's what I need, like advice from you guys.
So you're finishing your master's.
Yeah, I am doing both actually.
Wait, oh, master's in psychology as well as.
Bachelor's.
Oh, it's the MA/BA programs. Okay.
Yeah, I'm doing
Thank you.
both, and I'm a little bit scared because some of my friends that have graduated, I think back then in 2012, applied to graduate programs but didn't get in. And she is to me, from my impression, she's like an excellent candidate for the program, and she knows what she wanted. She has her match and like the professors, but um, she didn't get in, and she didn't even get the interview. So I feel a little bit scared about it. And yeah,
Yeah, I feel like, so I can relate with just certain pieces of the story. So I I went to UCSD, and I also did like the bachelor's track, and I was doing the psych honors, and I was involved in a lot of research, and I was going to do the master's because they have an MA/BA track too. And I
Yeah.
had been in that, and I was thinking, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to get my clinical psychology PhD, and this is what I'm going to do. And I was really determined, and I was really driven to do it. And so I actually had gotten some interviews, and I was really surprised because, I was young. It's like I'm only 21 or 22. You're a senior. It's like, and I think I thought that was really what I wanted to do. But what I realized, and I'd done everything right. Like I'd done so much research, and like all my things aligned. But what I realized, is that I ended up not. I still went to some of the interviews, but I ended up like not getting into the programs. But what I saw is that there were people there that they just a lot of them had gotten their masters already, and even though it's like a step that prevents you from getting to your PhD, I feel like now that I'm in a master's program, it's really helped me to develop like who I am and what I'm genuinely interested in. Because I think when you're in your undergrad, it's like you're just in this go, go, go mode, like you need to do this, what's the next step? You really don't have as much time to figure out as compared to when you're in a specific master's program that's specifically catered to exactly what you want to do. And that was just my experience, but I just see myself like kind of like Loretta was speaking. It's like who I was when I first tried to apply is not even who I am now. And it's if I had gone into a PhD program out of undergrad, I don't think I would have had the same experience that I would be having now. I don't know, Jenny mentioned some of that too, where you had said a little bit like, you had gone in straight from undergrad and it was a little bit different compared to those who done their masters. And I can totally relate to that because it's just, yeah, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like your life experiences, and I think that's why sometimes at the interviews they can really tell because when, it's like age is nothing but a number, and they do accept people right out of undergrad, but at the same time, I think it's where you are and what your interests are and how far that will take you, and if it aligns, then I think it'll match. But there's definitely a benefit in, taking the time off and doing a master's, and I don't know, but that was really hard for me too because I was like, no, man, that's just like more years till getting my PhD.
Yeah.
Now I have to go through all that, but I realize now it's like I would have, yeah, it's just academic. Now I'm going to be like 30 when I graduate from a PhD program, like it's going to be forever, and now I spend another, but it's been one of the best experiences because now I really, really know what I want, and I thought I really knew what I wanted, and now I really know, and I'm just like, wow, I that was silly of me, so I don't know how to describe it except from just when you're in it, like that's how you kind of realize it, so I don't know if that makes sense.
So it sounds like you'll be graduating with your master's after you're done. Have your master's while you're applying?
Yes. So I'm starting to take graduate courses in the fall. So that I think for my university applies to credits in undergrad. So it like applies to both credits. Um, yeah, I'm pursuing this field. Hope it works out. Starting to work on. I hear from other students that it's best to work on your start early as possible on your master's thesis. So in the summertime, I'm just formulating ideas for it, and I don't know if it will go well, but I currently work as a research assistant at the Center for Psychological Services at my university, and they have like youth outcome questionnaire data collected from the university at the clinic, so I'll use that to formulate um, my hypotheses. Yeah, it's and now I'm looking for like research experience involving real participants. I don't know how much emphasis do graduate programs place on really on interaction between the participants. So I'm looking for the research experience that involves the actual subjects.
I guess if that's your question, it's kind of hard to answer because my master's thesis will not involve any human interaction and using archival data from the CDC, and it's like it'll fly, as my thesis. I think maybe Jenny would be better at answering this because I have no idea how much emphasis. I think it would really depend on the program how much emphasis they have on actual like human interaction before getting into a PhD program.
Like, what I meant is, like, you have to prove yourself that you have the ability to interact with human subjects, and all I am doing is just working on, like, paperwork stuff, like, research stuff, not really having an interaction for, like, with human subjects.
So you're like not having the direct clinical experience of actually working with people.
Yes, that's what I meant.
Yeah, and I feel like I feel like the process of applying through to any program is sorting out like, oh, what are the right things to do, how much research, how much clinical experience. But I think there's so many. I feel like what it comes down to a lot of the times is just the extraneous variable of timing, like, and is it the right match? Like, it's like, are you going to find the right school, and is that professor going to be looking for the same thing? So I feel like a lot of it is doing what you can, and maybe you might not have as much clinical experience, but you buffer your application in other ways, and I think that there's some schools where, there's undergrads who have no clinical experience at all, and they still get into programs, and there's people who have their masters in clinical psychology masters, and they don't get in at all. So I think a lot of it's, I think you're doing a lot of great things already, and you're doing, putting in a lot of effort to really try to find a good match for school. And I think part of it is really just finding the school that will match with you, because I feel like I don't know, it's hard to tell, but I think, yeah, if that makes sense. Because I think that it's if you don't have the clinical experience, I think you can still get into school, and I don't think there is as much effort because I think they understand the limitations of undergrad experiences sometimes, and you might not have that direct clinical experience. So I think it just really depends on sometimes where you apply to, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, Jenny, what are some of your thoughts?
Sorry, I've been so quiet because I've been trying to get Judy to come on with us. She's available, but having some hard time technically. So yeah, I think it is. I wish I had more solid advice, but I think it's more like it depends and it's random sometimes. It's random in terms of I think. I've seen the selection process on this side of the things now a little bit more. As a student, we get to have input. We get to hear a little bit about how faculty make their decisions, and sometimes it just depends on so many factors that it's really hard to predict. And I think that in general, I can speak more like to my program, what they're looking for. So it's a counseling psychology program. A lot of our students end up being like counselors at college counseling settings or training directors. So a lot more people go to the more clinical track versus the more professor researcher track. So sort of giving you a context of what I know about my program. And I think this program looks for much more of like personal experiences and like clinical experiences and volunteer experiences working with people and with a diverse group of individuals. So they do look at, because quite a few of us I've noticed over the years have been like Peace Corps or AmeriCorps volunteers. So they do look at that service aspect. Quite a few of us have experience working with clients, like volunteering at domestic violence shelters. Even if it's not a formal clinical position, that they've had a lot of exposure to people. And research-wise, most people come in with some sort of research background, either as their master's thesis or have been involved in research in their undergrad. And I don't think publication is necessary, but I think that they do look at that as kind of a plus. And I know that my program also has, compared to others, not a super high requirement for GRE scores across the board, but pretty high up there. So they do expect us to come in knowing, how to write a research paper, how to do an IRB, how to collect data, and also some very basic statistics. Even though when we do come in, most of us take the very basic like stats 101 at the graduate level, but still stats 101, where we start talking about mean, medium, and mode. So we don't necessarily have to know a whole lot of stats, but I think that's also a plus for them. So they look at that. Believe it or not, our program, a counseling program, really look at, once you are invited for an interview, I think you are, very much qualified at that point to be a student in the program. And so when they do invite us for interviews, what they're looking for then is sort of our interpersonal skills. Like, can we, because also it's a cohort model, but like, can we get along with the other candidates? And can we get along with the current students? Do we show a lot of social emotional awareness? Are we, do we get drunk at the student social and dance on the table? We've had like lots of stories about that in previous years' interviews. But like, do we know how to handle ourselves professionally and interpersonally? Do we feel like a clique with our advisors and faculty members? They're also looking for that as well as sort of our academic and clinical experiences. So I think they do look for quite a well-rounded experience, but they're not looking for any specific, I don't think they look for any specific kind of person, because our students really come from a very diverse background. Like, just trying to think about my cohort, my cohort is a cohort of 5, and 3 of them came in with their masters, but came in from very different programs. Some are very clinically focused, some are very research focused. One of them came from a couples and families master's program. And then me and Nina, who's the other person who came in with her bachelor's and my bachelor's, we came in also with very different undergraduate and working experience. And the population that we work with were very different. Like, I worked with children with developmental disabilities and autism, and everybody else worked with very different population, because our faculty members' research interests are different. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, definitely. One of my other question is, what is the hardest about studying GREs? Like, your personal difficulties? Because I know it's way too early, but if I have time during the summer, I hope that I can pick up a book and then start studying or something. That's what one of my advisors told me to do. And I don't know, somebody asked me to study with them, and they applied to grad school this year but didn't get in because of the GREs. So what do you think is one of the hardest things about studying it?
For me, it's definitely, like, without a question, the quantitative portion has just been the death of me for 3 years since the first time I took it. I think the first time I took it was 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago. And I did well enough to get into the master's, but it's just not something that's going to fly for a PhD program. So a lot of people I've talked to have issues with either one, verbal, or quant, usually not both, but it's just a persistent problem for them. So a lot of people I've talked to have taken it at least twice. I'm going to take it twice, maybe even 3 times, and I don't really know what kind of study technique is working for me so far, except just banging my head against a bunch of equations and a bunch of books for the next, I take it in like 6 weeks. So, but quant has always kind of been my problem, even with like the SAT, it was, not up there. So it's helped me just like be aware of the mistakes I make, and I just feel like with something like quant, it's something you have to like personally work on. It's not like verbal where it's like you read a lot and like you just like memorize essay or GRE words, but I've just been practicing as much as I can, I guess. So if you do know exactly where your problem lies on the GRE, I would just throw your head against it like every single day. And if it doesn't come naturally to you, at least you'll know a lot of information and hopefully something will pop up. I don't know. I feel like I can't give a lot of advice on the GRE because it's something that I am working on right now, and I have no idea if I'm qualified to speak on it at all.
Yeah, I'm gonna be taking mine too, and same time. And I think the best way to approach it is, I think early on, take a couple of practice tests and really see just where your weaknesses are. You might find that, you excel in math and you're great with geometry and algebra, but you forgot how to do certain things. Or with the qualitative, you realize that, reading comprehension's okay, but vocab words are really hard. So I think if you take practice tests early on, you can kind of see where your baseline's at, and then start saying, okay, this is where I need to put more of my time into. So that way you're not just, scattering and spending more time on things you already know. And I think a big thing with the verbal section, at least, is pace yourself with the vocabulary. Cramming works, but there's still limitations to that. So I think if you pace yourself and just force yourself to do 5 words a day, then you can learn new words every day. I've tried multiple methods with the vocab words, and I've done note cards, I've done all of that, but one thing that I've recently been doing, super nerd status, but I've been getting the words, and I've been writing my own stories with the words. So I'll get like 5 words and write like a whole page about a story saying like this person, so it's like it really forces you to know the word and use it in context, because that'll help you with the sentence completions and sentence equivalents. So coming up with little techniques like that has helped, but I think that's part of it, is just pacing yourself and saying like, okay, once a week I'm going to write 1 essay. And I think when people cram and they go really intense hardcore, you get a lot of burnout as well, because your brain is just like overwhelmed. So I think if you start pacing yourself early on, that can be helpful. But I think the biggest piece is just finding out where your strengths are and weaknesses are, so you can start allocating your time appropriately. So that's all I can say.
Yeah, I have to agree with all of what you said. I think it was a while ago for me. I mean, it's been 4 years since I've been in the graduate program, so it's been a while, but I do remember vocabulary and writing was definitely my weakness, because I'm an English as a second language learner, so I feel like vocabulary I've never really caught up to my peers. So I sat down and like got one of those like GRE card stacks of like 500 words, and I tried to memorize all of them, and none of those words showed up on my GRE. So I think you have to think about that too, that like sometimes it is kind of random what will show up and what won't. I do think that spending time and sometimes spending money on some of the study materials is kind of helpful. I think unfortunately I'm kind of a big skeptic about what GRE is all about. So unfortunately, I do think that it tests us more on test-taking abilities than actual content knowledge. So I think that learning tricks and tips about how to take it is actually really helpful. And if you have the time and the financial freedom to take some courses on it, I think it actually might be really helpful. I think that does give people an edge. And unfortunately, I didn't take that. I didn't have time or financial resources to take extra courses, and I did okay, but I did have to take my like 3 times, because one of the times they also messed up on my scores, so I kind of have like a GRE nightmare. So I don't want to say this to scare you, but it's kind of to me it's not the most effective system, and so I think that it is unfortunately a hoop that must be jumped through, and also it doesn't say a whole lot about you. It just says a lot about how much you know about the GRE.
Yeah, definitely. I this summer I'm planning to study with a coworker that took the GRE in the past, so hopefully she will have some advice or something about test-taking skills. And how is did you guys plan to take the subject GRE? I mean, the psychology GRE? Or no, just don't take it? Or, I mean, some programs require both, I hear.
I took it. Yeah, I took it like a month ago, just because I know that some programs that I'm looking into do require it, and I just wanted to get it out of the way to figure out whether or not I could apply to those programs if I wanted to. I didn't want to like wait last minute to make that decision. It's a really strange test. Like I don't know if you've ever taken one of the practice tests for the psych jury, but it's very set up like an SAT subject, where
Yeah.
it's like yeah, it's like 260 questions. You have like 3.5 hours, and like you will use that much time. I took the entire time, and I could have used another like hour. And it's really strange because it is straight memorization. It tests exactly like what you know about psychology. So it's like I would say the most it depends. Like if you're looking to apply to schools that you know require the psych jury, then clearly you have to take it. If you're applying to schools that the psych jury is not recommended, I don't know. I took it anyway just because I felt like if I got a good enough score, it couldn't hurt if they didn't require it. But I'd say if you took it, I think it's like a $150 test.
Mhm.
I think if you took it and you did well enough, then it doesn't hurt. And if you don't do well, then the school doesn't require it. No one ever has to know. It just depends on like what your resources are and how much, and if the school requires it. I just know that the schools, at least one school I've been looking to, does require it, which is why I took it.
Mhm.
And I did find it to be a lot easier to study for than the regular GRE because it is just memorization.
Mhm.
I'm wondering, I also see that Jessica has left our conversation, but I'm wondering, I'm noticing the time, so we have about 10 more minutes left. I'm wondering if there are other aspects of the application or selection process that you have questions or want to talk about in addition to GREs.
I say statement of purpose. I don't know. I recently this summer I was actually planning to have I don't know if you heard summer research early identification program. I applied to that. I thought I had everything I had, like I have the qualifications, I have the recommendation letters, but I didn't get into any of them. And I asked the past recipient of the internship, like why, like can you look at my statement of purpose, maybe provide feedback about it. She said it's the flow, like the statement of purpose has to be like telling like a story, and it can really be, I mean, my statement of purpose, she said it's too straightforward, and it's too I don't know, it's too straightforward, and it's not it's not good. Yeah, it has to be a narrative um, informed. So yeah, that's what I need help with. I'm trying to work on it this summer because she sent me copies of her statement of purpose and copies of her friend's statement of purpose when her friend got into grad school. So I looked at it, but I read it, but I just don't get it. How do they write like this kind of statement of purpose? But I just need to figure it out this summer and go to writing center or something.
Yeah, I would say I think in any sort of writing, again, I'm, English is second language learner. It doesn't come naturally to me, and it took me a long time to figure out, like, what do they want in my writing? It took me a long time because I think, especially, like, I just remember, like, I think from my sort of cultural background as a Chinese woman, like, I think I have learned over time in my own culture, having gone to school in China and stuff, that it's almost sort of sophisticated when you are more subtle about your writing. Like you don't just like directly say what you mean. That you're more subtle about it. You know, you sort of dance around
Yeah.
the topic a little bit. Like that's supposed to be kind of like sophisticated writing. But I end up I end up getting a lot of feedback of like, no, Jenny, you just need to say what you mean, and you need to explain it. Like, how did you get from A to B? Because you're too like vague about what you're talking about. And
Yeah,
so,
that's what I got. Like feedback is it's way too vague,
yeah,
and it doesn't tell who you are. Like
yeah,
why do you why do you need to know who I am? Like I have like my first paragraph was the sites that I want to apply and why am I interested. Second paragraph is when I wrote about my research experience.
hmm,
Third paragraph, I wrote about the research project that I worked individually with a professor. Fourth paragraph, I wrote about the mentors that I want to work with at that internship site. Fifth paragraph, I wrote about continuation, the mentors. And sixth paragraph, I wrapped everything up. And it's no good.
yeah,
So looking at hers, her story is like much poetic. Like it's much like a flow, like a storyline of how she got interested into psychology, what fascinates her, the science behind it, and a lot of things. So I have to really rewrite that and think it over because you know what? I went to four 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 different person four different persons for advisement for the essay that I wrote. The writing center, the director of the clinic, the graduate student, and another friend of mine just for like spell check. They all said it's really good. You should just use that. I was like, should I cut it down? She's like, no, it's perfect. So I was like, okay, so this is good. I got the recommendation letters, I got the grades, and it's no good. So I'm just really confused now. And I don't think I will apply again. I mean, I will apply again next year, but um, I think it's the writing that really determines you're in or not. I mean, I'm a second language English learner. I came to the United States when I was 9, and I think even though people say I don't have an accent or anything like that, there is one. There is a cultural and communication barrier. Um, Honestly speaking, in the fall, I'm taking a class called Intercultural Communication in the rhetoric department. I hope that that will help me a
mhm,
little bit. Um, yeah, I think public speaking, writing, communication, um, the tone of your voice, and the pitch at the interview really is difficult for us, especially when English is a second language. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. I'm wondering, Loretta, if you have any thoughts on that.
Uh, it's just, it is different because even though I was born here, but English is still my second language. But in no way did I move here when I was 9. You know, I was born here. I had everything. I had all the resources. So I get, like, I understand that, like, English being your second, like, being a second language is the biggest barrier that anyone can overcome applying to any kind of program because so much depends on nuanced writing and it gets in the way of like the GRE. It gets in the way of interviews. People try so hard to understand that English being a second language is a barrier, but it's just, especially with writing, I never know what to say to people whose second language is English because for me it's such like a, because English, I've known English for so long, has come naturally and it's something that's like harder to explain, but I think what I usually tell people is to just read a lot of personal statements. I read so many personal statements writing my own because even though English comes naturally to me, writing really well doesn't come naturally to me. It just doesn't. I'm very, very, very like, I dance around everything. I never get to the point. I'm like, I go on tangents. I'm very unorganized. And the only way that I can organize myself is to read a lot of structured writing and then just to imitate that the best I can as soon as possible. I don't know if so much that'll work for you, but I'm a very imitative writer. Like that's how I kind of like learned English when I was really young, was just imitating others. So that I found that that's what works for me. I don't know if you've ever tried to do that, but I read like before I write anything. Usually, I read like 20 things um, that are similar to what I'm trying to do, and I just trying to follow that structure. And sometimes I'll even go in, look at personal statements, and I'll make little notes breaking them down, being like, okay, here's where she talked about her previous research. Here's where she talked about, her perspective in psychology. This is where she talks about what she can bring to psychology. And I try to like plug in my own life story following their structure because my main issue is structure. It sounds a little bit like that's what your issue is too, is flow and structure. So you can give that a try, but other than that, I don't have like that good of advice because I'm not like that great either. Like you sound like you have the same problem as I do. I can either be way too direct, in which there's just no pizzazz to it, or I am just like writing a fiction novel and there's like no substance to it. So yeah, we're all in the same boat here.
Yeah, I even got like, oh, we ran out of time.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah, this is great. Yeah, I missed the first one, but I think this is a great opportunity for Asian Americans like us to connect. I hope there's another one coming up.
Yeah, we could definitely make that happen.
I mean, I'm on my lunch break right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah, I ran from across the street, like right when I hit 12, I ran, like, yeah, because I now volunteer. Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays I work. Thursdays I volunteer. So, and I volunteer across the street, so it's pretty close to my house. But we could do like FaceTime or stuff like that, Google Hangout. I think it's a great way for students to connect. This is my first time talking to Asian Americans like you, speak interested in psychology.
Awesome. Yeah, I will we've been doing this with a section 5 with usually it's with like some of the professors. So we will ask them questions and there's a couple of students on the call sometimes. But I think it would be great if we do more of this. I think that if there's interest, I can send out another the word doodle. Well, I can send out another doodle to schedule another one about applying to grad school. It sounds like it's a really hot topic, especially right around this time of the year. And then we might even think about, we did one on internship a while ago because, if you're in a doctoral program, then the very end of your last year, if you're in a practical one, then it's going to be internship. So we talk about applying to internship. We might do one in the future about early career psychologists and what are their concerns, when you first get out for your first job and thinking about setting yourself up for your profession. So we'll try to do a variety of topics. And if there's interest, I'll definitely, we can definitely schedule another one where we can get more people on the call as well.
All right, sounds great.
Great. Well, thank you both so much for joining me today. This was really, really helpful conversation, and it's been really great. Yeah. Yeah, so I will put this video on YouTube. We're being live broadcasted. We'll also be